Bom dia a todos. É com grande satisfação que nós damos hoje início à 12ª edição do Digital Union. Este é um evento que é organizado, já vai há 3 anos, é um ciclo de eventos que são organizados pela APDC em parceria com a VdA, já como eu disse há 3 anos. Escolhemos sempre temas que estão a ter debate ou discussão ou transposição do quadro legal europeu para Portugal, ou temas do digital a nível europeu que têm impacto em Portugal. Hoje reunimos especialistas e profissionais para debater um tema de extrema importância, que tem a ver com os cabos submarinos e as oportunidades que isso encerra para Portugal, seja ao nível da regulação, seja ao nível da estratégia. E acho que é fácil perceber para quem trabalha na área do digital que esta componente do digital, da conectividade, quero dizer, esta componente da conectividade é a espinha dorsal de toda a economia digital. E se nós considerarmos, como já muitas vezes ouvimos dizer, os dados como o novo petróleo, então os cabos submarinos são os oleodutos que transportam esta maior parte do tráfego internacional da informação. Portugal, com a sua posição geoestratégica privilegiada como porta atlântica da Europa, tem esta oportunidade de se afirmar como um verdadeiro porto de dados europeu, fortalecendo as ligações do nosso continente com as Américas, com a África e contribuindo também para a soberania digital europeia. E, portanto, estas são algumas das temáticas que nós queríamos falar hoje, a ver qual é que é o potencial desta indústria, como é que Portugal e a União Europeia têm vindo a criar condições atrativas para o investimento, incluindo também a área da simplificação dos procedimentos regulatórios e ambientais, e também, claro, falar sobre aquilo que são as dificuldades, às vezes, de acesso a este setor, não é? Dos elevados custos de entrada, às vezes do enquadramento regulatório. Bom, essas são as temáticas que nós vamos aqui hoje falar. Eu tenho o prazer de dar aqui as boas-vindas em parceria com o Tiago Bessa e, portanto, passo aqui a palavra ao Tiago. Tiago, bom dia.
Bom dia, Sandra. Muito obrigado pela apresentação. Um gosto estar aqui novamente com a APDC, começar o ano de 2025 com mais um evento deste ciclo Digital Union. Já nos últimos 3 anos estivemos aqui a tratar de temas fundamentais para o futuro da tecnologia, para o futuro da sociedade, para o futuro da economia também. Hoje vamos tratar de um tema, como a Sandra apresentou e muito bem, dos cabos submarinos, que de facto são a espinha dorsal ou o backbone da conectividade e daquilo que movimenta a nossa economia, que são os dados hoje em dia. Eu quero, antes de mais, dar as boas-vindas a todos, agradecer a quem se juntou a nós para participar neste evento, dizer que terão a oportunidade de, ao longo do evento, colocar questões aos nossos participantes. Queria também agradecer bastante aos participantes no debate, a disponibilidade para partilharem connosco os seus comentários, as suas sugestões, as suas experiências. Uma vez que temos connosco um elemento da Vodafone de Inglaterra, vamos ter que mudar e fazer a apresentação em inglês para podermos seguir todos aqui os aspectos essenciais da apresentação. E, sem mais delongas, passo a palavra ao meu colega Rui Gordeta Almeida, associado aqui na VdA, que tem trabalhado neste tema de cabos submarinos, que nos irá fazer aqui uma apresentação em inglês. So, without further delay, I pass the floor to Rui Gordeta Almeida, associate at VdA, which will make a brief introduction to the submarine cables and the opportunities in terms of innovation and investment. Rui, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tiago, and good morning, everyone. So let's talk about a little bit about regulation and strategy of submarine cables, both in the context of Europe and specifically in Portugal as well. I will start the presentation with a brief setting the scene, briefly describing why submarine cables are important. This has been touched by Sandra and Tiago just before me. Then we will proceed to a brief description of the current regulatory framework applicable in Portugal. And finally, we'll conclude this short presentation looking a bit into the future in light of a recent ministerial order that is aiming at streamlining some of the more cumbersome procedures and licensing procedures applicable to the implementation of submarine cables. So we live in a data-driven society. The internet has pushed for more than 600 submarine cables to be active and planned worldwide today, which carry over 99% of international data traffic. From Europe's perspective, submarine cables are essential to connect the continent with its partners and regions around the world. Submarine cables act as a core enablers of the digital economy as well, as they support the development of new applications and services that rely on high-speed, low-latency, secure, and real-time data transmission, such as cloud computing, artificial intelligence, IoT, and Web 4.0. Studies show that the resilient backbone infrastructure based on secure submarine cables can boost the gross domestic product. In fact, according with a study from Copenhagen Economics of 2021, the Portuguese GDP increased by 500 million euros per year with the activation of Equiano and Links cables in Portugal alone. Submarine cables transport a significant amount of information related to digital services across extended geographical areas. In this sense, cable landing stations can be seen as authentic data ports that allow data to be received and stored on data centers and interconnection hubs, which are typically located nearby cable landing stations. The European Union has the potential to become a world-class data hub where data is stored, shared, and processed in a secure way, bringing benefits to Europe's economy, citizens, and environment. And they are becoming increasingly a critical infrastructure in terms of electronic communications. So it is very important to ensure their reliability and security, as any interruption, whether due to accidental damage, natural disasters, or deliberate actions by external actors, can lead to significant connectivity disruptions. Despite its importance, the European Commission has assessed that Europe's connectivity infrastructure is not yet ready to address the current and especially future challenges of the data-driven society and the future needs of all end users. This bottleneck also affects downstream connectivity infrastructures closer to the end users. Increased international connectivity would need to be matched by increased local connectivity. According to the Commission's white paper, How to Master Europe's Digital Infrastructure Needs, which was published about a year ago, Europe faces multiple gaps, such as on limited fiber coverage, and also gaps caused by delays in deployment of 5G. Overall, the white paper estimates that achieving the digital decade targets for gigabit connectivity and 5G may require over 200 billion euros in total investments. Failure to meet these targets could hinder Europe's digital transformation, and thus with potential spillover effects to other sectors like the finance, healthcare, education, manufacturing, e-commerce, and many others. One of the key instruments to foster the investment in new connectivity infrastructures is the Connecting Europe Facility, which is a funding program established for the 2021 through 2027 period. This facility devoted an unprecedented amount of investment to safe, secure, and sustainable high-performance networks, and in particular to gigabit and 5G networks across the European Union. It does not focus on promoting investment in submarine cables themselves, but it is an indispensable part of the overall connectivity strategy, considering its pivotal role in supporting Europe's digital transformation, and it does fund the installation of submarine cables, new submarine cables, although not exclusively. According to data that we could deduct from publicly available information, the European Commission, through this program, has allocated around 280 million euros in grants to co-fund 20 submarine cable projects in the first work program, which lasted until 2023, and allocated an additional 142 million euros to co-fund submarine cable projects in the context of the second program. But what opportunities does this create for Portugal? Portugal is a key node in the global network as it occupies a core position in ensuring connectivity between Europe, the Americas, and Africa. Indeed, Portugal is the geographical point closest to North America and Brazil, and also the closest European point to the African continent. It has a vast maritime expanse of about 4.1 million kilometers squared, possessing one of the largest exclusive economic zones in the world. This causes that around 15 to 20% of submarine cables passing through Portugal's area sovereignty. Thus, expanding the Portugal cable infrastructure not only enhances Portugal's connectivity itself, but also positions the country as a central node in Europe's digital network and fosters economic growth. This strategic position creates plenty of investment opportunities that companies can seize. Indeed, Portugal is among the nations actively developing a national strategy to promote investment in international submarine cable, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this presentation. Recent years have been prolific in the investment in new submarine cables in Portugal. For instance, the Link cable strengthened connectivity between Portugal and Cabo Verde and Brazil, and Equiano between Portugal, Nigeria, Namibia, and South Africa. And these are just two examples of major submarine cables that recently landed in Portugal, but there are others. For instance, the Two Africa cable, which has also recently landed and connects 33 countries on 3 continents, or the Medusa cable connecting the Mediterranean area, which is expected to land soon. Sorry. So what about regulation? The applicable regulatory framework can play a significant part when deciding whether to invest in new submarine cables. In fact, the recently published Draghi report notes that the regulation may be decisive, noting that more than 60% of companies see regulation as an obstacle or could see as an obstacle to investment, and 55% of small and medium enterprises flag regulatory obstacles and the administrative burden as their greatest challenge. Finding the sweet spot between promoting investment and regulation is the key. Not necessarily less regulation, but more efficient and effective regulation. In the following slides, we will highlight the main aspects of the regulatory framework applicable to submarine cables. And we will start with the core, the sectorial regulatory framework. In Portugal, the electronic communications framework is rooted in the European Electronic Communications Code, which was transposed into Portuguese law by law number 16/2022. Operators of submarine cables are subject to the same general rules and obligations that also apply to other retail or wholesale network and services offers under the common and general authorization regime. This regime acts as the gateway to the market. The law does not set forth a specific regulatory framework tailored for submarine cables, which may create difficulties determining the obligations applicable in each specific case. In practice, the application of this regime to submarine cable operators can raise questions and challenges. BEREC, the group of European national regulatory authorities for the electronic communications sector, has recently issued a draft report in which they signal some of these gray areas and propose some guidance. The extent to which the general authorization regime applies to submarine cable operators may vary depending on the qualification of their activity as public or non-public networks, or publicly available or non-publicly available electronic communication services. This is a quite conceptual and theoretical discussion. I will not bother any of you with it for now, or at this stage. I will just note that BEREC notes that recent business trends could recommend different regulatory approaches. And this is significant because the European Commission in the white paper noted that more than 60% of international traffic nowadays transits through submarine cables that are operated by large cloud providers, which hand over the traffic deep into the networks of public electronic communication networks. The application of legacy definition, like those that we have currently set forth, both in the European Electronic Communications Code and on the national laws, may raise challenge and create uncertainty regarding the appropriate framework governing such submarine cables. Aside from this conceptual discussion, by being subject to the general authorizations, to the general authorization regime, undertakings are subject to multiple obligations. We'll highlight three sets of obligations that, in our experience, typically raise more questions. First and foremost, operators are required to notify ANACOM in advance of starting their activity. And this regime ensures a streamlined access to the market by not requiring any specific approval from ANACOM for an operator to be able to start its activity. Second, undertakers are also subject to a set of measures to enhance and ensure the security and resilience of their networks. These measures are currently set forth in ANACOM's regulation on security and integrity of networks and services, and soon will also be subject to the national law, which is currently being drafted, that transposes the NIS2 directive. Finally, submarine cable operators are also formally bound to obligations on lawful interception, periodic reporting, and payment of fees. Although these conditions are harmonized across the EU, different laws apply in member states, and operators are required to communicate the start of their activity to each authority in which country they operate. This makes the sector being framed more like a group of smaller open markets instead of a large European common market. In addition to obligations under the electronic communication sector, the installation of submarine cables may also require obtaining several licenses, as well as complying with various environmental and public domain usage procedures. Most of the licenses set forth by the law aim at protecting the use of national maritime space under the legal framework for maritime spatial planning and management. In this context, the use of maritime space for the installation of a submarine cable may depend on a set of licenses, which include, for instance, as you can see, this could be 7 of permits required. Obtaining a private use title of the national maritime space, conducting an environment impact assessment, and obtaining a water resources utilization permit issued by the Portuguese Environment Agency. From our experience, this is what causes a real bottleneck, not the sector-specific regulations that, as I just said, merely requires operators to notify ANACOM instead of obtaining an approval. Indeed, gathering all the applicable licenses and permits can significantly slow down the process of installation of new submarine cables. And BEREC has already recognized that the set of authorizations and procedures involved is significant and entails an average duration exceeding 1 year merely to fulfill the bureaucratic and procedural obligations. This can act as a disincentive to investment, especially considering that the work aimed at installing the cable itself is also complex and time-consuming. Another focus of regulation that may apply to submarine cables pertains to the regulatory framework governing the construction and use of physical infrastructures suitable to accommodate electronic communications networks. At the moment, in Portugal, this regime is set forth in Decree Law number 123/2009, and which transposes the commonly known directive named Broadband Cost Reduction Directive, and which is expected to be reviewed or replaced by the Gigabit Infrastructure Act soon. Overall, this decree law aims at ensuring open and non-discriminatory access to infrastructures, as they can be expensive to deploy and replicate. It applies to all said physical infrastructures, such as pipes, ducts, manholes, or the cable landing station itself. This framework has a significant impact on the submarine cable sector, as it affects the access to and the construction of the infrastructures that are necessary for the landing and interconnection of the submarine cables with terrestrial networks. Thus, it represents both an opportunity and a challenge for the submarine cable sector in the EU, as it impacts the cost of investment in new submarine cables. We will highlight four main sets of provisions in this framework. Three, actually. First, the decree law imposes access obligations to physical infrastructures in a transparent and non-discriminatory basis. This can be either an obligation or a right of the submarine cable operator at stake, depending whether they own manage the infrastructure at stake, or whether they wish to access third parties' infrastructures. Second, the decree law also imposes the obligation to inform the market of any civil works planned for the construction and extension of physical infrastructures and allow third parties to join and share the works. The goal is to promote the coordination and cooperation among different entities that are involved in planning and the execution of these works in order to avoid duplication, reduce costs, and optimize the use of resources. Lastly, the decree law also sets the procedures and conditions applicable for the attribution of rights of way to the operators that need to use the public domain for installation of a submarine cable, specifically of physical infrastructures. As I just said, in 2024, the already mentioned Gigabit Infrastructure Act was adopted. It replaced the Business Cost Reduction Directive and will soon become applicable in November 2025. Although with some small important changes, the Gigabit Infrastructure Act is mostly aligned with the provisions set forth in the current national framework, which I just described. It is worth noting, however, that the Gigabit Infrastructure Act is an European regulation instead of a directive like the BCRD was. This means that it is directly applicable across all member states without need for transposition into national laws. This ensures a higher level of harmonization and legal certainty across the European Union and avoids the risk of divergent and inconsistent implementation of the rules. Nonetheless, the Gigabit Infrastructure Act also allows for some flexibility and discretion for the member states and the national authorities to specify certain requirements. The government has recently stated that the decree law 123/2009 is currently being reviewed, and thus some news are expected in this regard soon. But what about the future? As I said in the beginning of my presentation, the government issued in later 2023 a ministerial order aiming at streamlining the procedure applicable to the installation of new submarine cables. As I just shown, the installation of new submarine cables is subject to a complex regulatory regime, as it comprises not only a set of procedures that could slow down the deployment of new cables, but also being subject to a set of obligations that may not promote the investment in new submarine cables. And the government has recognized that Portugal is indeed Europe's Atlantic entry door, and it is identifying room to grow in this industry as a result of these geographical advantages. In this context, in November 2023, as I just said, issued the ministerial order under which it determined a set of actions aimed at simplifying the process of installing the submarine cables. These actions focus not only on the implementation of new cables themselves, but also on promoting Portugal as a country with favorable conditions for investment in large-scale data centers. According to the ministerial order, improving the country's international connectivity and proximity to data centers will make it possible to boost the quality of very high-capacity networks for citizens and companies, as well as support development of other technological industries. Given the centrality of this entire ecosystem in the digital economy, the order therefore determines a set of actions based mainly on 3 pillars. One is the energy pillar, with the government seeking to make Portugal a world reference in terms of digital economy based on the use of energy from renewable sources in an environmental sustainable way. The second pillar is the communications and connectivity pillar, with the aim of strengthening the development of and support for initiatives to improve Portugal's strategic position in terms of international connectivity through submarine cables specifically. And finally, information and data pillar, which aims at ensuring that Portugal achieves a permanent position in the location of data storage and processing centers. The order defined the set of strategic measures, as I just said, which can be divided into 4 main fields of action. Firstly, it emphasizes the use of the country's strategic location with a view to creating submarine cable corridors and strengthening its positions as international connection points. Second, it aims towards the simplification of licensing, the creation of specific zones for submarine cables, and the improvement of terrestrial networks. Thirdly, it emphasizes the sustainability concerns by promoting the use of renewable energy, as I just said. And finally, it coordinates institutional action by defining clear tasks and setting deadlines to pursue them. However, the deadlines set forth by the government have already fully lapsed, and at least as publicly known, there is no news on how the actions that were determined have been implemented. To achieve its goals, the government has instructed 5 different public entities to take specific actions. Some of those instructions include the following: the creation of suitable areas for the installation of submarine cables in the National Maritime Special Plan, and the creation of a single licensing portal to connect industry players to the public entities with powers to grant licensing and permits to install submarine cables. And as well, the definition of a mechanism to ensure or facilitate the infrastructure of electronic communications networks in locations or routes with high demand, namely as a result of investment in the construction of data centers. Time will tell whether the measures to be put in place pursuant to this ministerial order will be effective in helping Portugal achieving its full potential as Europe's data hub. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Rui. Thank you so much for your presentation. And before we continue the conversation, hi, my name is Cindy Berardo. I'm the events manager here at APDC, and I'm happy to be moderating the conversation along with Tiago Bessa. But before we get started, I would like to mention that we will send a post-event newsletter with today's presentation, video, and report. Also, we kindly ask you to provide feedback. The form will be included in the newsletter that you will be receiving, but also shared in this session's chat. So, what's clear is that Portugal's strategic geographic position combined with the right regulatory framework and investment can make it a key hub for global connectivity. So with that in mind, let's carry this conversation forward, and I would love to present our panel. So Ana Carla Souza, Wholesales Director at MEO. Welcome, Ana Carla. Augusto Fragoso, General Director of Information and Innovation at Anacom. Welcome, Augusto. And Robert Marshall, Security Policy Advisor at Vodafone Group. And I think he's joining us from Dublin. So Robert, don't be sad. Today, Portugal is just like Dublin, cloudy, gray, and I think rainy. So welcome to you all. And before we start our debate, I would like to ask you to share your general thoughts thoughts on the topic or comment to Rui's presentation. So maybe we will start, ladies first, with Ana Carla. Ana, are you there?
Hello, good morning.
Hi,
Good
Ana.
morning, all. And well, first, let me just start by saying that thank you for organizing this event and for your kind invitation. For me, it is a pleasure to be part of this discussion, to share insights and to learn with all of you. And let me just start by saying what is obvious. That is, countries that are better connected are countries more developed, more productive, more democratic, less asymmetrical. The digital infrastructures are part of our economy. And of course, they play a key role in the global development and in the economic growth of our societies. This is why they are so important. And when we see that we are facing a huge digital transformation, our data is in a fast migration from our PCs or from our offices to internet and to public clouds. We see the importance of these huge infrastructures like the subsea cables. They are now playing a key role in this industry. But the truth is that in Portugal, we land subsea cables since the 19th century. They are part of our history, but they are also part of our present and of our future. So basically, this is what I also want to share of our experience in this matter and the challenges that we feel in our days when dealing with this industry.
Thank you so much, Ana. And Augusto, what about you and your initial comments to this subject, please? Hello, Augusto, are you there? Maybe your microphone is off.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, it is. Someone muted me. I don't know if it was intentionally, but
the floor is yours.
Well, obviously, being here in the role of the regulator is being an opportunity to bring also the regulatory part to this discussion, but more than that, a strategic view that we have been following in the last, I would say, 6 years. ANACOM played a vital role bringing the submarine cables theme to BEREC, for instance, that was referred, but also to other entities like ITU and other international bodies when everyone was thinking in terms of telecommunications that submarine cables was something that would not fit the regulatory framework so much at the time and was not deserving so much attention. Of course, the digital world proved them wrong, and more than that, the new strategic or geostrategic geography also brought up the necessity to look very closely to these infrastructures as vital and critical infrastructures, bringing for us all the demand for new thinking and new approach, strategic approach to the networks and mostly to what we want to do with those networks. And I will be very happy to go on about these later on, and of course discuss these with our panel colleagues.
Thank you, Augusto. So new thinking and new approach, that's fantastic, and what we will be talking next. But before I pass on to Robert, I would just like to remind everyone that after these initial reflections, we will move into a structured round of questions of sharing and debate. So to all participants, please feel free to raise your questions in the chat. And at the end, we will have some time for a Q&A. Not sure if we'll be able to answer all the questions, but I'm sure we will get to quite a few of them. So now to Robert. Robert, hello, how are you? Everything okay? You're in Dublin, right?
I'm in Dublin this morning. It's not raining, so that's positive.
Oh, lucky you.
but it's cold. It's cold. So I hope I haven't passed any of the bad weather across to you guys in Portugal. And apologies for everyone having to speak in English this morning. I haven't brushed up completely on my Portuguese, so I apologise and thank you for accommodating me. Just with regard to what Rui and fellow panelist Anna and Augusto have said so far, I'm just struck actually by and having been involved and discussed with colleagues just regard specifically about Portugal is the forward-thinking approach that Augusto pointed to and Anna pointed to, and the opportunity that but the regulator and ANACOM and governments have recognised with regard to subsea cables and the opportunity for Portugal, because that does very much chime with the experience within Vodafone, that you've considered this a long number of years before it was a topic du jour because of geopolitical reasons, obviously in the last year to 18 months. But you've considered this for as Augusto said, for 6-7 years, and a strategy and approach that is going to benefit the economy, but thinking of but as part of end-to-end, full end-to-end connectivity, and that's the approach that is going to bring benefit to Portugal. And I know that a similar approach, speaking closer to home, was taken by the Irish government, but in looking to see what is best and what's the best strategy and approach. But I think Portugal may have first mover advantage, really welcome to see that drive, and really maybe bring some of those lessons, I think, to colleagues at European Commission level, similar to how ANACOM brought this onto the table for BEREC, would be welcome. But looking forward to discussion and bring, I think, some just thoughts and some views from the Vodafone experience across the countries we operate in.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much. And thank you, Anna and Augusto, for your initial comments. Now, as Cindy pointed out, we are moving forward to a more structured questions and answers. And I go back to Anna because just yesterday, so right on spot, Meta announced plans to build the largest underwater cable project connecting, I think, the 5 continents. This project, Waterworth, involves the construction of a subsea cable with more than 50,000 kilometers, which is longer than the Earth's circumference. Looking at MEO, and of course an important player in Portugal, but also abroad, what challenge does this increase in demand for international bandwidth poses to MEO? And I'm thinking, of course, a very important player with 2 cable landing stations in Portugal, in Carcavelos and Seixal. So what challenges and opportunities does this innovation and this progress in terms of submarine cable poses to MEO?
Well, Tiago, just a small correction. We have 13 landing stations, actually, not 2.
Yeah, I was talking about the mainland. Yes.
Yes, in the mainland.
Not the
mainland,
island.
we have 2, and it's basically where the international cables are being landed. We have 5 international cables now in Carcavelos and in Sesimbra. But yes, so in this morning, I was also commenting with my colleagues that the new Meta announced it's going to be the biggest one, of course. Well, the landscape is changing, and personally, for me, these are very interesting times to witness and also to participate. And for those who are not very familiar with the subsea industry, I just recommend you to take a look into telegeography site. There's a lot of data available. And it was also into that site that I took a look just to see how the bandwidth is growing. And when we look into what happens between 2019 and 2023, we see that the usage for international bandwidth was just multiplied by 3. It's an amazing growth, and it will continue, because a couple of years ago, the traffic was basically traffic from operators, telco operators. But now what we see is that if more and more the demand to connect data centers to data center is growing. And this is the first thing that we see, the first driving that we see for this huge change, the bandwidth, the huge demand for bandwidth. And when we travel, we can see that we travel by plane. But our data usually travels also with us, and it travels through submarine cables. We need to access data. Companies need to access their data in a fast and in a reliable way. That's why we need to have our data very close to us. And we can do that by having the data into the next data centers where we are. This is why in the moment that we are speaking, there are many terabytes of information being exchanged in the subsea networks. So the huge growth for demand is, of course, plays a key role in this transformation. But there's also another thing that we are seeing in this industry. It's a couple of years ago, and when I'm speaking about a couple of years ago, let's just go back 10 years in the past. And on those days, the key players in this industry were telco operators. And now what we see is that the giants of internet are now deploying more than 75% of the investment in this industry. But does this mean that operators are no longer have an important part in this industry? Well, I think no. I think we continue to have an important role in this industry, but we are not investing in the traditional way of shared capacity in the consortiums, but we are now investing with them on the fiber pair level. But we need to invest, and we also need to be present in this industry. The other role that we have is by providing services, and this is where we have been more active. In MEL, what we did, it was just we opened, because we own the infrastructure, not only the cable landing stations, but also the front haul, the back haul. We also have specialized, very specialized teams working in this industry that are recognized with know-how and experience on it. And what we did was we opened them to these new projects and these new investments. Basically, we are providing them services like the landing stations themselves, the O&M, the hands and eyes, the front haul, also the back haul. So we are partners. We can be partners in these investments, and we can also be service providers for these new investments. This is what we are doing in this industry.
Thank you, Ana. So Augusto, Ana is talking about having data close to us and about the fact that we need to invest together, not only the telcos, but with the giants of the industry, and also provide these new services that Ana mentioned. So I'm going to ask actually two questions. What role does Anacom play in Portugal's broader digital infrastructure plans? And how does it expect to contribute to attract investment in subsea infrastructure and strengthen Portugal's position as a connectivity hub? I know they're two long questions, so if you get lost, just answer the first one and I'll go back to the second.
I thank you in advance, because for sure I will get lost. I mean, unless we have 22 hours of webinar. Let's see. I would start with a made sentence, but that is true. Collaboration is the answer. We have to collaborate mostly closely with government markets. And when I say government, I would change to government, both at European and national level. And what we have been doing actually is to have insight and have a better overview about what's the international display of capacity and what will be the next probably capacity need bucket that allows us to position ourselves in terms of international connectivity. When we talk about submarine cables, well, there are certain factors that we are observing. First, follow the money, which is if you connect or if you overlay the already laid infrastructure in terms of submarine cables with money flows, you will see that they are deeply connected, especially when it comes with the market connection between EU and US. You can see clearly that the market flows and the economical flow is clearly following the pathway of the data projects that we are seeing in place, which lead us to think that since for instance, UK is not part anymore of Europe, if it makes sense that 80% of the international connection capacity that actually has to be changed because half of that capacity is due in terms of its old capacity. It's not enough anymore, and some of that capacity has to be changed very quickly. If it makes sense to do it connecting London to New York, or if other routes would make more sense. We also have opportunities like Ireland. We were talking about Ireland. Ireland needs to connect to Europe, and obviously, probably it would prefer other routes than London or UK. Pisces is actually an example of that rethink in terms of international connectivity. When we talk about landing more cables here, we also have to be aware that the data coming to our shore will not stop there. We need to provide also the strategical routes to the center of Europe, namely connecting us with the flaps. So that is very important as well. We have to think about international connectivity, both inland and overseas. In terms of national coverage, I always say that the question is what we want connectivity for. Connectivity is not deployed to its own usage, of course. It's deployed to develop other markets, other sectors. And the thing is, what will we do with this connectivity? If we don't arrange a way of having in Portugal investments in terms of the data industry, then, as I used to say, kidding, we are building highways where we cannot even deploy the sausage truck, or in Portuguese, a barraca das bifanas, as we say. So we have to think that, for instance, we have been seeing these infrastructure needs growing together with the necessity to provide support for AI development. But, for instance, are we looking strategically to AI development in Portugal or in a broader way in Europe? Because I have talked with several analysts, and they were very clear about the opportunities they see of AI investment in Europe against other opportunities they are seeing in the States or other geographies. And the common sense is that they don't want to invest in Europe. Regulation in AI is frightening them. And the thing is, if we don't arrange ways of having that kind of investment coming to our countries, to Europe, then all this infrastructure will benefit exactly who. But of course, we have seen other opportunities also from the AI demands. Hyperscalers start to move data along what I would say the energy low-cost pathway. So the thing is, each time we see the deep connection between energy capacity, special green energy capacity, and building of significant infrastructure in terms of data centers. And here the thing is Portugal actually the right place to install this kind of hyperscaler infrastructures or other data center infrastructures in terms of energy? I would say yes, we are very well established in terms of green energy. As we know, we have been growing that capacity for a while. And also there, we think I think we have important role to play. Of course, we have already established that the new geopolitical situation leads us to think differently about the global infrastructure geography and geometry. And one of these days, we were talking about with the CEO of Deutsche Telekom, and also some financial people established in terms of data in Frankfurt. And they were telling in firsthand that they started to look to Southern Europe and Portugal as the only viable way to rethink the feeding lines to Frankfurt, which means that, and with 20% now, probably more in the next few years of the subsea capacity passing in our E-zone, we also have opportunities in terms of the protection and the sovereignty activities needed to deal with that fact. So protecting this infrastructure in terms of safety and security, it's something that we can also develop and assure to all the interest parts that would think about passing cables in our maritime zone. Other things that Portugal or ANACOM is doing in terms of supporting this vision is obviously regulatory simplification and attractiveness through different tools. Of course, as I said before, we were the ones bringing it up to BEREC, for instance, and I would say that we are leading the way we should look to these infrastructures, which doesn't mean that we don't have to have significant obligations when it comes to security or when it comes to access, but that is in development and it has to be harmonized with the rest of at least of Europe. But we have also been supporting the national initiative in terms of investment in the approach to SAF Digital, for instance. We are bringing up to the knowledge of our national stakeholders when the calls are open. We help them understanding, and we help connecting them with DG Connect when needed, so the Commission understands better the nature of the project. And of course, we are always involved supporting the national initiatives or the initiatives that run in Portugal, connected with DG Connect and specifically in this SAF investment plan that is going on. Other than that, we are trying to bring together all the stakeholders, not only political stakeholders. For instance, we have a binomium that it's very important, which is the Atlantic binomium connecting Açores and Madeira, not only through CAM, but through other infrastructures that will land there. We want to strengthen the I would say a new backbone, Atlantic backbone, connecting the North Hemisphere and the South Hemisphere. And we really think that Açores and Madeira will play an essential role in this matter. We are talking with the promoters of the new connection between the new project, actually. Not connection yet, but connecting Europe, the Northern Europe, with Tokyo under the Arctic Sea. And we are already thinking how to connect this new capacity that will permit Europe in general and Portugal in particular to access the Asia-Pacific area in better, more secure and faster conditions in terms of latency than the ones that we have now. And that I think I'm already lost. So Cindy, please jump to the rescue.
That's fine. You sure said that you could have another 20-something hours apart from the time that we have for the debate. Thank you, Augusto. That was very insightful. But now I think Tiago has a question for Robert. So yeah. Tiago, are you there?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Cindy. So Robert, I pass now to you. Before focusing in Portugal, I want to take advantage of having an international operator with us, just like Altice. So Vodafone is an international group. One of the things that Rui mentioned in the in the framework presentation is that we have a regulatory landscape that is fragmented. So we have different topics raising from telecoms, from environmental, from administrative permits, maritime law. So different rules, different permissions, different authorizations. So being an international operator, I'm sure that you have faced these challenges in different markets. Maybe you can share with us some of your experience and insights on how to better deal with this fragmented regulatory landscape.
Sure, I think that's very interesting. And you know, I was struck by that point. It's something if you ask colleagues in our subsea cable team, and I'm struck by what Anna said. You know, there's quite a depth of and a cross section of a team who develop, plan, and then implement and build the cabling systems. And I think I know from my experience that this probably the single biggest issue or bugbear and pain point, if you want to say, is permitting, the permitting process, and I think the duplication of national requirements is something which has to be factored in at the beginning of each cable planning, and when we're considering a new route or diversification, we have to consider the jurisdictions that we're going across. And I think on average, from our own internal calculations, we've seen that we have to buffer in an additional potentially 12 to 14 months into the planning process, which is backed up actually by a recent report, which I can share with colleagues. Actually, not a recent report; it's about 18 months old, from ANISA, which backs up that kind of the average time that's added to from the permitting process. And I think I'm struck by something that yourself and Rui said about the To Africa cable, which we're a partner in, and which actually obviously has landed in Portugal. And we just in the last number of days, we were the landing party to Crete, and we may be overtaken by our colleagues in Meta, but it's currently the longest cable system in the world at the moment, in navigating around the African continent. And that again is the timings were delayed due in, I won't mention the markets, but in two particular markets, due to the need to apply for additional maritime permits, which we weren't made aware of in advance. We thought we had, if you want to say, our ducks in a row, but we had to factor in that additional timing. That's more money. That is a drag on investment, and you're trying to make, as Vodafone or as any other entity, if you're in a joint venture, you're trying to make your business case to your colleagues first of all, at a board level, to get approval for it, and then also to investors to continue to support the project. So it can be a drag on investment, and you're trying to drive that further investment while dealing with, I think, some of the points that Anna said, deeper pockets of colleagues, our tech colleagues, our OTT colleagues, but you know, we need to be part of that debate and part of that future planning. What I'd say in terms of possible solutions, I think is something Augusto touched on as well, is the need for collaboration, the need for all of the parties to come together, is for the private sector, for government regulators. So that's why to hear some of what Rui has said and Augusto has said in bringing together from a level in Portugal is really welcome. I think we need to see this mirrored at a European level, and I think the European Commission recommendation back in February of last year was a positive step, but it's only one step. I think I would be honest, Europe is, at a level in Brussels is maybe playing a little bit of a catch-up. And I think it's welcome to see the progress that they're making and engaging with different national experts in that process to improve the governance. But what I suppose just specifically around permitting, what I'd say is we need to see a situation where we have a national set or a European set of guidelines across permitting, so that there's a smoother and more efficient process, but that it is governed by an appointed national authority, whether it be with Augusto's team in ANACOM or with Comreg or MARA, the Maritime Regulatory Authority in Ireland, which have made positive steps as well, similar to what ANACOM have done. But I think we need to see that discussion happening. We need to see the players brought around the table to bring that experience from Anna and Mayo to ourselves and Vodafone, other operators, to bring that experience to bear to talk about, well, how can we all have the same aim here. We all want to have the more smoother, efficient deployment of this key infrastructure, and it needs to be happening much quicker. You know, we saw situations. We speak to colleagues in Australia where they went through this process, and it brought all sides together, and they looked at ways to really improve that and make that a more consistent and a synchronous process. We really do need to see that. I suppose even if I went further, you know, if you wanted to leverage the opportunities of the focus around security and resilience, which is critical, I think we need to look at something like a pan-European framework. I think that's or you know, more harmonized standards that are applicable to all, but that we don't just start this conversation in isolation. We bring everyone together to see what would be the most beneficial way to bring such a set of harmonized standards together. What would they look like? We bring all players together in an industry forum and look to really bring forward more fit for purpose legislation. Because really struck again by what Rui said at the top of his presentation. You know, there isn't one single framework governing subsea cables, and that's a big gap. You know, if we're talking about more simplification at a European level, this is an opportunity to a critical part of the end-to-end infrastructure. This is a real opportunity to look to try and address that.
Thank you, Robert. So now I would go on to Anna. And Anna, what Robert just said, and I think all of you touched this point, is that there is a big need for collaboration to bring everyone together, to improve governance, to have a European set of guidelines. We're talking about speed, we're talking about simplifying, and we're talking about learning from others. So with this in mind, what are the biggest challenges that MEL faces in maintaining and expanding subsea cable infrastructure?
Well, this is a very interesting question. And let me just emphasizing what Robert was saying, because he touched the point, which is the cost and the importance of previsibility. And believe me when I'm saying that we work very hard every day in attracting these new investments to Portugal. And not only the cables, we also want to increase the ecosystem, because it's important not only to have the cables landing in our shores, but also to be able to have the networks interconnected into our country, because this is the way how we can develop the entire ecosystem, not only the landing of the cables. We don't want them to land in our shores and then the capacity to flow directly to Spain. We want to create a really hub and to increase the digital Portuguese hub. But what Robert was saying, it's very, very important, because when we are in the market and when we are discussing these challenges with the investors, what we feel that they want is previsibility, because time is money, but in the subsea industry, time means a lot of money. Because when we say that, and when the question arises, and this question arises always, is how long will the licensing process take? And when we say it will take around 1 year, the next question is, what do you mean when you say around? And we also need to face this and to address this, because the new framework is has very, very good measures. I'm not going through all of them because Rui and Augusto have already done that. I want just to emphasize one that I consider that will be a game changer, and is the creation of corridors. This is a very welcome measure, but we also need to go a little bit further. And if we want to be really competitive when we compare ourselves with other countries that are also fighting to attract these investments, and I'm speaking about our neighbors, because yes, we consider ourselves, and this is how we address the market. We are Europe's front door, but yes, they are also very well positioning to attract these investments. So some details are important, and we need to be able to say, look, we are not talking about a certain number of months. We know exactly how long it will take. We know that since the moment that we ask for the first documents, we will take these months to get to the final approvals. And this is something that we consider that is important, to give previsibility to the investors, because there's something that someone that is investing a huge amount of money in this project, they don't want, and they don't want uncertainty. They don't want to get to the end and to have an extra cost. And what Robert was saying, it's I completely understand, I completely agree with him. And so having a more simplified process, it's important, but it's also important to have very specific deadlines of response of all the entities to all the procedures that are needed to be done to have the licensings. The other part that I want to put into this discussion is the terrestrial infrastructures. Basically, I'm talking about frontal ducts and also ducts that are connecting data centers and carrier houses. Because I think that we can also improve this process. For subsea, and I know for experience that we cannot have dedicated ducts every time, but we should. The ducts, the frontal ducts where the cables are, they should be dedicated to subsea cables. And for security measures, and for me it was very interesting to hear what Augusto was saying about security, I consider that they should not be disclosed. When the new projects are coming to and want to land in Portugal, they know how to get this kind of information, but we shouldn't disclose this just for security reasons. And the process to build these infrastructures, we need to speed up all this process, and we need to work on this and to collaborate. This is where we need to collaborate more, not only in the licensing process, but also to work on the terrestrial infrastructures, specifically on the ducts that are supporting the subsea cables. And this is the two specific measures where we see we need to collaborate and we need to improve, and that can make the difference when attracting and when we are competing for these investments.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Anna. I think you touch a very important point on the tension between sensitive information, but in addition, access to the information by certain investors in order to make their decisions in terms of new projects in specific countries. But I want
Tiago, let me just add something. Sure. I'm sorry. And
sure.
Because security is important. Yes, security is very important. And we hear many times in the media that our Navy is trying to secure the shores and so on. Yes, but do you know what, according to our experience, is causing more damages in the cables? Usually, they are not so sophisticated boats. Usually, what is causing more damages in our cables, and we had a very recent cable cut that last summer that in the segment that connects the Açores to mainland, there are ship boats or recreative boats, and it's also important to secure the corridors. We need to take a look into our shores, of course, but we also need to keep an eye on the subsea corridors, just to make sure that these small ships and the, let's say, less sophisticated ships are not causing the damages in the cables, because it usually, when we have cable cuts, the main reason are these small ships that are causing them.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. I noticed that Robert raised your hand. Maybe you want to comment on this point, and then we go back to
just quickly, Tiago, and you know, Anna raised a very important point, and you know that's why to hear of the opportunity around corridors is a big bonus. I think, you know, from our experience, yes, there you know, acts of sabotage, you know, they're part and parcel of the ecosystem and have been taking place. Yes, the landscape has changed, but from our perspective, I know that it's anchor drags, you know, not just Europe wide, it's anchor drags, it's ships not checking the maps. They've been provided with the information. We had off the west coast of Africa, 18 months ago, there was an anchor drag which you know, severed completely a cable, which was offline. Yes, you can diversify, but the impact that had was enormous to the system, and the resources that had to be put in place. So you're seeing probably in Europe, I know, about 250 you know, cable breaks per year, if I'm correct from my detail from the European Subsea Cables Association. But you see, you know, we need to bring that more harmonized approach. You know, we touched on earlier, but these are equally as important to share this data, which is shared amongst ourselves, and it's to improve that information sharing, understand from the maritime side what could improve to share that detail to improve that, and then for, I think, the authorities to understand, not Augusto but other authorities to understand that critical importance. You know, it's the resilience within the system, and also, you know, we may touch into later the redundancy that needs to be considered into these systems too. But no, just wanted to add that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. That's a very important point. We have some questions in the chat, so thank you very much for members of the audience posing these questions. One of them is connected with regulatory simplification. So I tend to go back to Augusto, because I took note that you mentioned that regulation may promote or hinder investment. So you mentioned that some AI investors are being frightened by AI regulation in Europe, but of course there's a need to regulate, and regulation can indeed be somehow promote investment. So does regulatory simplification be the way forward in terms of promoting investment? And in specifically regarding submarine cables, a question posed on the dedicating licensing portal and the single point of contact. Do you believe that these measures are indeed, they can indeed promote investment in submarine cables in Portugal?
Well, yes, I believe that it will play an important role. Actually, when you come to it, of course, it will play a role, but it's not the main aspect. That is not preventing Portugal to be considered at this point as an important player in terms of landing locations. But of course, it's very important to have certainty in terms of investment. Investors need predictability, like Anna was saying. And there are several aspects that might play a very important role in terms of even regulatory attractiveness, or if you want, regulatory competition. When we talk about the ministerial order, a good thing that was intended there, it was the connection between several dimensions that needs to be deeply understood and interacting in terms of attractiveness, and to build the digital capacity in Portugal, which is energy, data, and connectivity. And that ministerial order was trying to wrap up in one piece different strategical dimensions that should be addressed to facilitate the deployment of the digital infrastructures in Portugal, being connectivity only one of the aspects. Of course, the one-stop shop, it's very much supported by us from the beginning, even much before this ministerial order. We were mentioned it clear. There was even a project basically connecting ANACOM and the GRM to promote such portal, even yet without the ministerial order in place. So basically, we do believe that this one-stop shop will simplify the process. We'll also not only have in one place all the information regarding to the different players, governmental players and municipalities, etc., that are involved in the process, giving a clear view what everything that has to be done in terms of licensing to an investor that would like to think about Portugal as a landing place. It would bring also, and that knowledge, that specific knowledge concentrated in one platform would for sure facilitate the process of thinking about Portugal in those terms. The other aspect would be, of course, to have only one contact point to address all the necessary things about licensing, even if in the background workflow connections with connect this platform with the different entities, because I don't believe that we would reach the point where it would be created only one entity to deal with it, because there are too many different political aspects involved. But this would be for sure something good for everyone. Also, in terms of investors, it would be very important that we could express the capacity that a country is having, not only about international connectivity, but about inland and national connectivity. Portugal is very well supported in terms of optical fiber network, for instance. And another thing that we are doing, ANACOM is doing, is to promote and to support deeply the overall coverage of the country, namely what were considered white areas. Actually, Portugal, due to ANACOM effort, was the first country accessing the investment funding structure that was created to cover all Europe with fiber optic to the house, and that also expresses how deeply we are working to provide that national connectivity. So, but I was saying that expressing that capacity, I would say in a political marketing way as well, would be very important. But it's funny, and it's funny because we have approached the APME, we have approached other industrial policy bodies, if you want, talking about this. And when we talk about harmonization of the regulation, it's important to understand that a submarine cable, by concept, usually connects at least two different jurisdictions. Many times, many different jurisdictions. We were talking about to Africa. That is a nightmare of in juridic terms and jurisdiction areas. But for instance, I give you an example. It was stated that one of the information that would have to be available was the location, more or less the location of the cables, the existing cables, so investors could understand better the ecosystem where they were wanting to install the new cables. And when it comes to it, for instance, a cable that connects England and Portugal, in England, that information is classified secret. In Portugal, is not yet. It will be classified somehow. That is not yet defined. It's in definition. But the thing is, so it's strange to have infrastructure that, in one hand, is classified secret, and in the other hand, it's not classified, or it's having a lower level of classification. So how will we do technically these? So We represent the cable to the F. Well, there are harmonization questions that are important, but definitely a one-stop shop portal would be very relevant, both to have information about the infrastructure, about the environment, about the conditions that the country is having to support digital business, and also to provide a faster, simplified action in terms of licensing corridors. Another matter that was covered in that order that we support totally. ANACOM supports it, but for instance, ICPC doesn't. ICPC considers to be a liability. So basically, the idea is if you concentrate more cables in only one area that is previously identified, it's more or easier target for malicious actions of any sort, and that brings in, for instance, defense, etc. So, but ANACOM position is very clear there. We consider corridors to be essential for protection because until now, the evidence that we have, it was already stated by Anna, is that most of the cuts are accidents and are provoked by fishermen, by other kind of vessels, and protecting that area would be easier even if we don't have a very expressive Navy capacity to survey continuously and support the surveillance of that area. Today, we are talking about different kinds of infrastructures, also supported by UAVs, for instance, and that would make feasible with lower costs to protect those areas, both to supervise, to have an action to prevent, and also to act after if something happens. So yes, we do think that the one-stop portal is important and corridors are important.
Thank you, Augusto.
Thank you, Augusto. And now I had a question for Robert, but maybe, I'm not sure, Robert, you let me know if this question is not suitable for you. But we do have a question in the chat from Carlos Oliveira. And the question is, the growing dominance of privately owned subsea projects led by big techs, Meta and Google, may pose political risks in the present geopolitical environment. So what can or should governments do? Governments, regulators, telecom operators in Europe and Portugal do in this context? Is that something that you can answer?
Yeah, happy to try. Not an easy question for a Tuesday morning, but
Thank you.
No, I think it's possibly a nuanced answer. I think colleagues will probably understand. You have to, first of all, we all have accepted they're players in the space. Many of us have joint ventures with them, or they take capacity on our systems, or vice versa. So I think you need to recognize that first of all. But I think an issue that needs to be addressed and is being addressed is, I think, with regard to the regulatory landscape. And I think it's about ensuring that all players in the space, and I think it's something we've all touched on at various points in the discussion, is ensuring that big tech, OTTs, whatever description you want to say, ourselves are governed and adhering to the same regulatory framework, the same set of standards. There's no divergence. I think that will bring a level of reassurance, and that will bring a level of consistency that supports in the investment case. I think that that's one aspect. I think also it's potentially looking at newer way, more something that's taking place in Portugal, but needs to take place in other markets in other ways, is more public-private partnership between telco operators, between governments and authorities to look to I suppose build that consistency and that within the system. And I think also something we've only slightly touched on is with regard to funding. I think we need to consider how funding generally from a European level needs to be more consistent. Welcome the fact that the Commission are looking post their risk assessments and the work that's done with the national authorities and national experts to build new cable projects of European interests, but it seems that there needs to be more of a strategic lens, similar to what's taking place in Portugal. And why do we need to build the cables? It's to build, yes, capacity for where there is need. And I think we need to look at funding and supporting projects of a more strategic nature. I know for ourselves, where yes, Africa is and I know for Portugal, Africa is a big market and one where there needs to be connection, but it's also then into Asia, connect Asia, more consistency in connecting back into Europe, etc. I think there may be some of the points that potentially need to be addressed, but it's probably even a deeper conversation to look to address. But there are some of the ways. I think it's to see it as an opportunity to address these things, but also to recognise that they have a role in the ecosystem, but to work together and that we adhere to a common set of standards or harmonized approach.
Thank you very much, Robert. Augusto, I saw that you raised your hand. A quick comment, please, since we are almost at the end of the event.
Yes. Let me try to make it brief.
Please.
In terms of strategic view over the European network and the Portuguese network, investment made based on demand and only on private demand may not fit the necessities of sovereignty that we have. Basically, to say that both resilience through new nodes that are not based on demand, but about strategic geographically new vision, or if you want geometry, cannot be achieved by only private investment, both to cover areas that have the need but not the demand at this point, meaning build them, they will come, cannot also, in my understanding, be only supported by private initiatives, which means that we should look at it. Those are strategic, also the choice of investors that support our European economy. All those are in the bucket where we should consider the different private-public approach in terms of investment.
Thank you, Augusto. Very, very brief and to the point. Thank you very much. So we are at the end of the event. So I want to start by congratulating you.
Sorry to interrupt you. Do you think we still have time for, I think there's another question in the chat bot, or is this something that maybe they can ask our speakers directly through LinkedIn? I don't know. Let me know if we still have time.
I believe most the question was regarding the how can Portugal harmonize the need for complex regulation based on European rules and the private company interests? I think we touch a little bit on this, but for sure Luís Bernardino can reach out to our participants to obtain more information. And since we are at the end, so I want to start by congratulate Rui and thank you for setting the scene, and also to Ana, Augusto, and Robert for sharing with us the insights, suggestions, and comments on this very interesting and important topic for the future of Portugal and for the future of the digital sector. So thank you very much for the audience for being with us. And Cindy, for your final notes.
Exactly. Thank you to all of you. Thank you so much for your insights. And also, we would like to ask the participants, if you can please be so kind to fill out the feedback form that you will be receiving in the newsletter. And again, the newsletter will have the video, will have the notes, and will have the form, which we would really appreciate that you could give us your feedback, which is really important for us to improve the next sessions. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day.